Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I had an internal debate about one of the key issues of Israel as the nation state of Jews, which is language. And I've decided that since all of my colleagues illustrated that we in Israel speak English quite well, I will give my presentation in Hebrew.
Today, I would like to talk about something which is quite surprising, namely the fact that 60 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, that was founded, as we've heard, after the UN resolution of 29 November 1947, that stated there would be two states, a Jewish state alongside an Arab state, and despite an international and ongoing and consistent international commitment to the solution of two states to two peoples, two nation states, each of one of which is an expression of self-determination of the Arab and the Jewish peoples in part of the land of Israel. Despite that, the State of Israel is the only country in the world that I know of whereby the discussion about its existence is not a discussion about borders, as we've heard from Professor Blum. First of all, it's a dispute about its existence. There are countries in the UN that openly and hope and call on expectations to the physical annihilation of the State of Israel without any much response from the international community. But beyond that, even those that are okay, quote unquote, and are willing to accept the existence of the State of Israel, usually they negate the right of the State of Israel to continue to self-determine itself as a state where the Jewish people determines itself or has the right for self-determination. This is my great puzzlement. It is further reinforced where juxtaposed against the demand of the Israeli state to be not a neutral state, but rather a state where the Jewish people determines itself or has the right for self-determination, which is a recognized international right. The contrary demand is not only the demand of the Arabs, as was spoken about in the partition plan of November 1947. We are talking about the Palestinian state, and the Palestinian state is a salient nation state. It is a country that determines itself as a Muslim country, even though there is a very large Christian minority. It determines itself as an Arab-speaking country. It determines itself as part of the greater Arab nation. And those people who question the right of the Jewish people to have one place around the world where it is a majority and can control its own destiny and have political independence are those people who call for the immediate implementation of the Palestinian right for self-determination as a state, and further than that, the right of the Palestinians to have their own state where there would be no Jews at all, but even the right of the Palestinian right within the State of Israel to continue to fight the State of Israel from within about the legitimacy of the determination of Israel as a democracy, but also as the nation, state nation of the Jewish people, out of an ongoing demand for the right of return. And if you know that, if you understand the geopolitical situation, the implementation of the right of return is the annihilation of the Jewish state. And therefore, this assertion as if we already agree to two states is a very misleading assertion, because it's not enough to agree to two states. We need to agree to the principle two countries to two peoples, and what emanates from that. And what emanates from that are things that a large part of the international community either refuse to refer to or refuse to accept. There is a very strong allegation around the world that Zionism must be equated with racism, which was approved by the UN Council for many, many years. One of the most interesting things that I think that revealed the complexity of the situation has to do with the fact that the 29 November 1947, which is the day the UN Council adopted with a majority of more than two-thirds the decision to set up a Jewish state in part of the land of Israel. Is today the Solidarity Day of the United Nations with the Palestinian people. This very fascinating historical development that has brought about an inconsistent erosion of the legitimacy of the idea of the existence of a Jewish state is quite staggering. It is interesting. It is fascinating. And if I were not a Jew that lives here in the land of Israel, in Eretz Israel, in a country which it is supposed to be the stable country for the Jewish people, it would look as a very fascinating cause for historic research. And I'm a Jew who lives here, and I'm very, very worried. So I would like to recall a few fundamentals that are the renewed assertion why this is so self-evident, or what was self-evident in 1948 and in 1937 at the Peel Conference, and why it was self-evident that the solution to the issue of their political organization between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean cannot be one Arab state as the Arabs have always wanted. It has to be a state that would provide the Jews control over some of the territory, control in some of the territory where Jews would be a majority, where they can control immigration security, where they can sustain their own public Jewish and Hebrew culture, where they can be the only place around the world where they feel at home, that they are not a minority, that you can welcome or persecute or threaten. I would like to do two things very, very briefly. The first thing is to explain what were the circumstances under which in 1917, 1937, 1947, 1948, 1949, the world went along with the idea of a Jewish state, and what has happened or has transpired that there is an erosion of this idea. I would like to explain this to you, and later on I would like to tell you very briefly, because I don't think this is the audience that needs to hear that. I would like to say very briefly why the reasons, not the explanations, what are the justifications that were provided by the Jewish state during that time. Just justifications, not only were they not weakened since then, but actually have been reinforced. Justifications that existed and still exist today, and I think that the public in Israel in its entirety and the international community must meet its commitment that stems from its own principles of the Charter, of the Human Rights Charter, and of the conventions, and to stop lending a hand to the delegitimization of the state, of the Jewish people to have its own state. The principle of self-determination is a principle that was recognized by the international community. It is not something that was invented by the Jews. The international community, in the wake of the First World War, it became apparent the danger, the political danger of lack of consideration, of discrimination between ethnic and national and political communities. I don't want to go into a historical chapter, the collapse of the empires with their own structure, the multinational, multicultural, and multi-ethnic attitudes, but I would like to say that the principle of self-determination stated that one of the foundations for stability, for international stability, is strong countries. And countries that in principle there is congruence, not complete congruence, not total, but there is reasonable congruence between the political community and the cultural, ethnic, and national communities. This was the underlying principle. It was applied to Europe, and it was also applied later on to the post-colonial and post-imperialistic movement, namely the right of people that they were under colonial regime to have self-determination. The big debate with regard to the state of Israel, the Jewish state, was a dispute on two fundamental questions that I don't want to deny them. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but I want them to be put on the table. From the very start, The movement that brought about the establishment of the state, the Zionist movement, said two things. First of all, the Jews are also a people. It's true. They are also a religion. It's true that religions and peoplehood in people are intertwined in an inextricable link that does not exist in any other people. But Judaism is also religion and a peoplehood. It is important to state those two. It is also peoplehood, not on religion, because of secularization that has brought about the Jews that wanted to remain Jews chose not to be observant. This was a fairly new phenomenon of many religions, but also the Jewish people. The Jewish national movement followed other national movements in Europe and in other places and stated, I want to have a full existence. What does it mean to have complete national existence? Full national, it means that I don't have to privatize my own existence. I don't have to hide. I don't have to be a Jew in my own home and French or English or German on the outside. I can have completeness where I'm a Jew in my home and a Jew also on the outside. Jews in Europe suffered from a series of threats. I'm going to talk about three threats. There was a physical threat, an ongoing threat that was of deportation, of pogroms, of extermination. There was also the threat of culture, of assimilation. Part of it was forced upon a part of it had to do with emancipation, but there was also the threat of estrangement, where you cannot belong anywhere. You will always be a foreigner. It's true that the French said that Jews are everything, but Judaism had a little more than just nothing, and Jews did not have everything. The same was true in France and Germany and all the others that underwent emancipation. This combination of the threats to Judaism, cultural, physical, and identical of the ones of identity, have been conducive to the fact that the National Zionist movement, that was not very strong, did not conquer all the hearts of the Jewish people. It was a very powerful movement, and it started the idea that in order for the Jews to have complete existence, they must to have their own territory where they would be a majority. A Jewish majority was the sine qua non for Jewish Renaissance. I'm not going to go between the cultural Zionism and the religious Zionism, but we know it. But when Zionism started getting organized, a majority of Jews where you can have complete Jewish independence was a sine qua non for the national Renaissance. This existed under the mandate. We've heard part of the story in the review of Professor Bloom. The Zionist enterprise succeeded because the National Zionist movement has been able to build in Israel not only theory, not only the Balfour Declaration, but a critical mass. At the beginning of the 20th century, to my mind, the Jews did not have a right for self-determination in parts of Israel, not because they did not have historical rights, but because they did not have a critical mass of Jews that lived in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, and therefore the arguments of the Arabs that lived in Eretz Israel, they said, this is our land, just like any other people that stops being under a colonial regime. Let us be the majority and let us have a sepa, which is a very serious argument, which is very weighty in the international community at the beginning of the 20th century. If the Arabs had been able to set up a country or to control over immigration, it is possible that the Jews would not have had an opportunity to set up their own state in the land of Israel. The Turkish and then the British mandate were opposed and limited everything, but Jews were able to create a critical mass from the mid-30s. The problem of the international community is no question of whether to ratify or to approve the establishment of a Jewish state, but what can you do with a Jewish collective which is very vibrant, speaks Hebrew, and with productive, modern, that lives in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, and the Fuel Committee, and UNSCOP says it, and the Anglo-American community, and Bernadotte says that. Everybody says that you cannot, for the Jews to live under one political framework because they have aversion to one another. The Arabs are not willing to accept Jewish existence, and that was not symmetrical. So you cannot implement the rights of the Jews for self-determination without giving them a state. This was the argument in the mid-30s and was reinforced after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, after the fact that Jews everybody turned down to Jews.
So there was a justification for a Jewish state. We made this decision at the time, but now this is over. That it's post-Zionism. There was a justification for a Jewish state, but now it's already 60 years later. There is a state. The Jews are safe wherever they live. Maybe the less safe place for Jews today is the State of Israel, but why should there continue to be a Jewish state? Why should it continue? And I think that those arguments that were in favor of establishing the Jewish state then exist today, although we have to say that the Jewish people managed to take advantage of its state in a wonderful way. The State of Israel today is a very strong, developed, large country, the largest Jewish community in the world, something that didn't exist in 1948. But together with that, the existential, physical challenge and the cultural one of the State of Israel not only did not disappear, but on the contrary, it is getting stronger. And why so? In 1930, the image of Jews was that of victims, of a persecuted minority, people that helps themselves, trying to build for itself a place of its own. It's easy to connect to such a thing. Of course, the Holocaust strengthened that very much. But what happened to us in the recent years, which is something that in part we have the responsibility for, and some of it is manipulation, is that the State of Israel today is presented in the world as something completely different. No longer is this people who have no place. It's no longer a people who have nowhere to go. This is a conquering people, like a tyrant, a dictator nation. It deserves to be fought against, a liberation holy war. This is a people that by necessity creates a country of apartheid. Although this resolution of Zionism equal racism was annulled, but the argument behind it appeared in Durban and it doesn't want to go away. Vis-a-vis this thing, the State of Israel today has to face, and vis-a-vis this thing, it is very difficult to cope. Difficult because of a few reasons. One is that the controversy is also inside the State of Israel and also within the Jewish people. The greatest critics of the State of Israel today and of the national enterprise of the State of Israel are Jews and Israelis. Some of them are people who sincerely are anxious about the moral image of this country. Maybe they don't know or they don't care enough the way people take advantage or manipulate the things they say in order to negate not only the justification of this policy or another of the State of Israel, but the justification of the mere existence, the mere right of the State of Israel to exist. I am sorry, I was sure that in this panel there will be some sort of division. I will say just a little, but okay, they allowed me to say this. It's not complete, and I think that it's important to complete it. But I think that it is very important that our line will be one that distinguishes very distinctly between criticism against the State of Israel. That is something which is legitimate. It's not good to do it with double standards. It's not good to criticize Israel about things that are allowed to any country. But it is something legitimate, and it's even a duty of the Israelis to criticize their government from inside. There's a huge difference between that and the phenomenon that I spoke about, which is the phenomenon not just negating this policy or another of the State of Israel, but negating the legitimacy of the existence, or in another way, or in the same significance, the negation of the right of the Jewish people to have the one place where it is a majority. The language is Hebrew, as I am speaking in this hall this very minute. This language is Hebrew, the calendar is Hebrew, Shabbat is Shabbat, Saturday, and not another day of the year. And this ancient people who gave the world the eternal Bible lives redemption in its own country. Thank you very much.